From my estimates, I would guess it was probably about 20 to 15 feet long and probably about 10 feet long or 10 feet wide.
What could you see on the ground, if anything, other than dirt and ash? And
you couldn't see anything. You could just see dirt, ash, and people walking around, broken trees.
There is zero historical precedent for a large commercial airplane and its passengers completely disintegrating upon impact, regardless of speed, cause, or crash site. Turkish Airlines Flight 981 began breaking apart in mid-air after suffering extreme decompression and crashed into a forest. All 346 people were killed. 40 bodies were recovered, 6 of them still in their seats. Air India Flight 182 was blown up in mid-air by a bomb over the Atlantic Ocean. Wreckage from the plane and 131 bodies were recovered, with autopsies performed. Japan Airlines Flight 123 suffered mechanical failures 12 minutes into its flight and crashed into a mountain. It remains the single deadliest aircraft incident in history. Wreckage and even 4 survivors out of the 500 passengers were recovered. Those are just 3 examples. And yet, on September 11, 2001, we are told that a 757 crashed into a field and left virtually no identifiable wreckage or passengers. The Department of Environmental Protection also reported in October 2001 that no trace of jet fuel was found in groundwater or soil at the crash site. Flight 93 allegedly crashed with over 5,000 gallons, 37,500 pounds of jet fuel left. How is this possible? In 2006, during the trial of the alleged 20th hijacker Zacarias Moussaoui, the FBI provided a batch of evidence that allegedly survived a catastrophic crash in near-perfect condition. Among the exhibits were a red bandana, a Kingdom of Saudi Arabia driver's license, John Talagnani's driver's license, and flight attendant C.C. Lyle's personal effects, including her driver's license and Marriott hotel card. Although a 757 managed to obliterate itself upon impact, fragile material known as paper and fabric managed to survive nearly without a scratch. The FBI also releases pictures of an engine and 2 pieces of fuselage. It is unspecified where those were found. What really happened near Shanksville, Pennsylvania on 9/11 remains a mystery. But one thing seems clear. A 757 did not crash intact into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
Did the building come down?
I don't know. Something fell. What you see?
It was pretty clear at one point, and then this whole bunch of smoke and glass. And I think we're just about the last ones in this building right now. I think you should leave. Everybody else is gone.
Okay.
I'll just make sure that there's nobody else coming downstairs.
What happened?
I hear the top of the building fell down.
In 1984, construction began on World Trade Center Building 7, a 47-story office building 300 feet away from the North Tower. It opened to the public in 1987 and housed offices for Department of Defense, Internal Revenue Service, and was also the Secret Service's largest field office. Building 7 was considered the Central Intelligence Agency's largest station outside of Washington, D.C. The details of the office's functions remain classified. The Securities and Exchange Commission was also using the building to store 3,000 to 4,000 files related to their investigations. And of course, they have no record of what those files were. On June 8, 1999, Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's Office of Emergency Management Command Center on the 23rd floor is opened.
The new facility is located in downtown Manhattan, across the street from the World Trade Center's Twin Towers. The command center on the 23rd floor is bulletproof and bomb-resistant, with its own air supply and generators. It's linked to city airports, the Coast Guard, and the Pentagon. Computers will soon have detailed blueprints of every major building in New York City, as well as evacuation routes. Hurricanes and heat waves would be handled here, as well as terrorist attacks. Though New York officials say their facility is not impenetrable, they're confident it could handle even the worst crisis imaginable. Deborah Fayerick for CNN, New York.
On the morning of 9/11, before the first plane strikes the North Tower, Building 7's alarm system was unexpectedly placed on test status at 6:47 a.m. for a scheduled period of 8 hours. This normally occurs during maintenance, and any fire alarms from the building were to be disregarded. After the second plane strikes the South Tower, Building 7's power was deliberately shut off and its tenants evacuated. Following the collapse of the North Tower, almost all of the surrounding World Trade Center buildings were completely destroyed, but the structures remained standing. Building 3, a 22-story building directly below the Twin Towers, was split in half by the South Tower's collapse. Although the building was severely crushed by falling debris, the structure remained standing. Building 4, a 9-story building east of the South Tower, was almost completely flattened. The remaining structure did not collapse. Building 5, a 9-story building east of the North Tower, suffered from severe fires and structural damage. Building 6, an 8-story building between the North Tower and Building 7, suffered a giant gouge in its roof and severe fires. Neither Building 5 or 6 suffered a collapse. Neither did the Deutsche Bank building, which stands to this day and is currently being demolished beam by beam. Neither did the Millennium Hotel across the street. Building 7, a 47-story office building hundreds of feet away, burns controllably over a few floors and suffers structural damage to its south face before collapsing completely to the ground at near free fall speed. The collapse of Building 7 was rarely reported on the day of and after 9/11.
Yeah, it's very strange that was not even hit by a jet, and yet it falls very rapidly and essentially straight down into its footprint.
Although the collapse of Building 7 was clearly a phenomenon and further investigation was needed, the building's steel was removed from the site and destroyed. No pieces were recovered from the debris for analysis. However, FEMA's volunteer investigators revealed after their limited studies that some pieces of steel from the rubble of Building 7 experienced something never before seen in an office fire. Some pieces of steel had large holes burned through them, evidence that a high-temperature corrosive material had formed and burned through the beams, suggesting temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Celsius were present.
But what the Worcester Polytechnic Institute scientists reported was that steel, as they looked at it, using similar methods to what we've used on the red-gray chips, these are electron microscope methods and X-ray EDS methods, they found high temperature, indication of very high temperatures, oxidation and sulfidation, sulfur in the steel.
Yet, this phenomenon will not be mentioned again, either by FEMA or other agencies investigating the collapse.
Now let's fast forward to August of last year, 2008. NIST finally came out with their preliminary report. Now, it's very interesting. They ruled out diesel fuel fires. They said it is due, and they also ruled out any type of fatal damage from the towers collapsing, particularly the North Tower, which is across the street, Vesey Street, I think. And so there's some damage, sure, but they ruled out it was not fatal, and it did not contribute to the initiation of the collapse. That's what NIST said, and I agree with that.
When questioned at a public comment session after the draft's release, NIST was forced to acknowledge that the collapse of WTC-7 experienced a period of freefall for 105 feet.
That is acceleration at 32.2 feet per second squared, which is just dropping a ball in a vacuum, and that's how fast it accelerates. Finally, in their final report, they have this